All right, we'll go ahead and start this series of tech tips and tricks. I'm Johan Blumhert, and I'm the Northwest sales engineer for WatchGuard. And I do apologize first and foremost that this is only a 45-minute webinar. I did receive a comment on a previous boot camp that we just completed, and I had received a comment that it was a fire hose of information, too fast, too little, and I apologize beforehand because this is really one of those series that should have more time allotted to it rather than just 45 minutes. But I'll give you some tools and definitely some tips and tricks and documentation links that will definitely be able to get you off the ground running for this series. So as we begin, I just wanted to mention that we don't have a moderator, so if you send in the questions, there might be a slight delay for me to catch up with those questions. We'll go ahead and address those at the end as well. So today's series of tech tips and tricks, again, this is a monthly series. We're going to focus on optimizing network performance and redundancy. And I just want to mention it's a great time to talk about redundancy as I look out the window here in Oregon and see the snow falling down. And hopefully my internet connection won't die during this because I don't have redundancy set up just yet. So as we talk about redundancy, and this really was on the forefront of my mind for a number of reasons. One is that recently in Colorado, which is one of my territories, they had all of their flooding. So we had an increase of people asking about, well, what do we do if maybe our ISP connection gets flooded out? Maybe there's a power outage that you're running on a backup generator. So really, as we talk about being able to do multi-WAN, I was working on a proof of concept in which there were 50 retail locations, and they all needed to branch off as VPN to corporate. So as we kind of talk about the agenda for today, we have definitely multi-WAN on the radar. And for some reason, the message came across that we were also going to talk about dynamic routing, which if you know about dynamic routing, we can't really cover that in the 45 minutes, but I'll just go ahead and touch on that and definitely point you in the right direction. So the majority of what we're going to talk about today with multi-WAN is going to require the Pro upgrade. Now, anything 3 series and above is going to go ahead and ship out with a Pro upgrade. If you have branch offices with a 2 series, you'll want to contact either myself or your territory sales manager, and definitely look at getting the purchase for the Pro upgrade. I did want to mention that right off the start, some of you that I've met or might have heard my story is that I was actually a WatchGuard customer in a school district for over a year just before coming to work for WatchGuard. One of the things that I wish I had known about was this WatchGuard little hidden Easter egg on the website. So if you go to WatchGuard.com, go to support, as you see there by the picture, and configuration examples, you can see that under configuration examples, we actually have a number of case studies or proof of concepts along with those example configuration files. So just know that those resources are there for you and hopefully can get you started in the right direction. And there are a number of them, actually, when you look at, for instance, doing multi-WAN. Let me just highlight, bring your attention. We have a branch office VPN from a private network link, as well as example configuration files that you can find there. So again, if you're an existing WatchGuard customer or you want to be able to look at how to do various features of WatchGuard, check out that section. And definitely reach out to your sales engineer if you have any questions about anything in there. So I guess that would lead us to why would I use multi-WAN? And to some of you that might be abundantly clear the value of multi-WAN, but there's others of you, you might be curious about this topic of being able to, or why you would leverage multi-WAN. So when you talk about multi-WAN, there's a number of 4 areas that I came up with. You might have more, but increased bandwidth. So when we talk about having redundant links, maybe you have an MPLS network as well as a Comcast modem as well, maybe a cheaper option. You have these two connections. Why not just be able to leverage them rather than leaving that Comcast link sit there and idle when you could be leveraging them for more bandwidth? So that's number one, increased bandwidth. We also hear a lot of corporations or smaller businesses or organizations that talk about having a T1, so a private link between corporate and a branch office that maybe is used for corporate data or voice over IP, but then and I use the example, the branch office employees want to watch what does the Fox say on YouTube, or you can use any other sort of traffic-intensive application. Maybe it's Pandora. And again, I wanted to bring your attention to we can stop, if you are concerned about your employees not getting to YouTube, we can stop that through application control. But in the event that you wanted your employees to have a little more freedom on their browser and want them to entertain themselves on YouTube, they can actually, you can set a policy so your branch office employees go over the Comcast connection or a cheaper connection to get to those traffic-intensive applications, while saving your T1 connection for maybe latency, void traffic that is going to be affected by latency issues. So again, there you would look at being able to share that connection. T1 would handle your corporate traffic, while your public internet traffic would go over a cheaper Comcast connection. And then privatization. So again, here we have an example of two IP addresses, and I want to create a separate network as in corporate versus guest, or you might say we want to have domain A versus domain 2, maybe, or B. Maybe you have two customers, your service provider. You want to be able to separate all of that traffic. And you can certainly separate that coming in through SNAT, and then have outgoing traffic go up that specific policy. And then the big one today is actually talking about redundancy. So maybe you have an MPLS network, and I've heard from a number of people that maybe it's not always that reliable, and when it goes down, ultimately you're losing sales. So now we can look at the option to be able to fail over that multi-WAN or that MPLS connection and simply spin up a branch office VPN. With 11.8, we have quite a few features around the virtual interface that we'll go into as well. So I guess the number one question that you might have is how, I just got off of this webinar with Johan. It was great. I can see the use case scenario. But how can I go ahead and implement multi-WAN? So again, you can use some of the typical network connections. Maybe you have a point-to-point today. Maybe you want to go out and get a cable modem or fiber, or maybe it's MPLS. And I just noticed I had a spelling mistake there. And then maybe you want to tie in non-traditional network connections. So again, at my former employer, I had an XTM, and I simply had my cell data plan that I would tether, and there's a couple of options that we can do that. For instance, we have a tether over a cell phone option with a travel router where it just hands out an RJ45 connection that we can plug right into the XTM. Or maybe we look at using a cradle point with a 3G or 4G data card as well that simply gives you that Ethernet connection. So there's a number of ways that you could leverage. Most of you probably have smartphones, and ultimately if your network goes down, you can tether over your smartphone. I can't guarantee that the bill will be that cheap, but that's definitely an option for you. So when we look at multi-WAN and the way WatchGuard handles multi-WAN routing decisions, and again, I do apologize. I know somewhere in there it said it will not be death by PowerPoint, but I just wanted to include this in the PowerPoint so that you could reference it at a later point. In the PowerPoint and presentation will be available after this webinar as well for you to reference. So as we look at this, we can easily see the decision flow chart. I'm not going to get too in-depth there for the sake of time, but really we can follow the packet flow as it transitions through different policies and multi-WAN specifically in there. So again, as we look at multi-WAN, some of the use cases it might be to be able to distribute outbound traffic among multiple external interfaces. We can look at several modes, and we'll transition in a little bit from slides into the actual XDM environment and look at how we can configure those options for you. So with multi-WAN, we have a few different modes. We have round robin, failover, interface overflow, and then a routing table. So with the routing table, we're going to first look at the policy-based routing, and then we're going to use the equal cost multipath or ECMP routing. Now all of these, let's say you have something configured in interface overflow mode, or maybe even round robin or routing table, we're going to go ahead and fail back to failover mode in the event that one of those links goes down. And again here, I apologize about all of this text on the slide. I just wanted you to be able to reference it. But when we talk about round robin, I wanted to bring your attention to a couple of things here. So if you do have the Pro upgrade, maybe you want to specify a weighted distribution of outgoing traffic against external interfaces. Or maybe if you only have standards, so that again would be a 2 series. Maybe you only have a 2 series and you want to be able to distribute bandwidth evenly among external interfaces, and you can do that today. So there's a little bit on how the round robin works, and again, I'll show you. I don't want to spend too much time on the slides. We'll show you more in depth. So failover, when to use. So obviously, with failover, when you want to use one external interface for all traffic, just to highlight that, and that's in red for you. And you can have another ISP that you can use if the primary link goes down. So that could be an option for a cell data card or cell data plan or a 3G or 4G card. You also have the option to reserve a WAN 2 interface for special traffic and use WAN 1 for all other traffic. So if the WAN 1 goes down, all traffic can use WAN 2 for the emergency outage. Interface overflow, so when to use. And again, this is perfect for the cases where maybe you only have a cap on one line and you want to be able to, once a bandwidth at any given point reaches that threshold, you want to be able to spill over that traffic onto your secondary interface. So you would use this method when you want to restrict the maximum bandwidth that each external interface uses, and then again when the threshold is reached, new connections use the external interface in your list or the secondary. And again, with that, you must have a Pro upgrade to be able to use that license. The routing table, you can actually do some very cool things with the routing table, and this is actually increased with 11.8 and being able to look at VPN connections as virtual interfaces. And while I would love to spend hours talking about the powers of being able to leverage those virtual interfaces, we'll just touch on that, and maybe if you would like, we'll have a tips and tricks series specifically on virtual interfaces and doing that. But a routing table essentially allows you to create a policy and then specify how you want that policy to distribute the traffic or what interface you want the traffic to go out. So we'll talk about that, and ultimately that's policy-based routing that you can use as well. So when we talk about, to dynamic routing slipped into the agenda, so I just want to briefly talk about that. One of the powers or the drivers behind dynamic routing was really to be able to have that MPLS failover where we spin up a branch office VPN. So here in the picture you can see, let me just bring up a drawing tool real quick. So we have site A, and you can kind of see the configuration for that. And then site B. So in your case, this might be corporate versus a branch office, or it might simply be 2 branch offices. Maybe corporate's not in there. And traditionally, you would have all traffic going out your MPLS network. So again, there's some options available with that, depending on who your provider is. The problem that I've heard is, well, sometimes maybe the internet component or the privatized, some kind of component of the MPLS will fail. Now, when you're talking about a retail branch or maybe a financial institution, that outage ultimately can result in a large number of monies to your organization and have a detrimental effect. So as we look at this, we have the power to really leverage dynamic routing so that we can say, you know what, let's spin up over the cloud, over maybe 3G or 4G, hopefully 4G, a 4G connection. Let's go ahead and spin up that branch office VPN. And again, with that, we can limit what traffic goes over that VPN. So while this VPN is active, we're going to limit all the funny cat videos or what does the fox say, so that we ultimately prioritize our point-of-sale traffic. So from there, I wanted to switch over into a live look at how that's going to play out in the policy manager. So the first step with this is to go ahead and look at your network configuration. So this is, again, my training environment. So I have a few different options here. Now, I would really caution you or advise you that when you have multiple external interfaces with this, that you go ahead and label them appropriately. For instance, if you just see external 1, external 2, external 3, then that could be a little cumbersome down the road when you're actually going into policy. So again, as we look at being able to, the first thing would be to set up all your interfaces as external. In this case, we had an interface name alias. So whenever I view that external interface or build policy around that, now rather than see external 1, I'm going to see Comcast cable modem. So again, as a former network engineer and as a sales engineer, I would definitely recommend labeling that appropriately so that you don't have any confusion down the road. I also have a link here for T1. That might be used for point-to-point connection to another location. And again, we're just going to do external from that. Typically at T1, you would have a static IP address, but for this case, we're just using DHCP. And then we have a Sprint air card. So again, with this option, we're going to have DHCP more than likely on a Sprint air card, or maybe we're looking at a travel modem that's synchronized or that's sharing out my Wi-Fi connection from my tethering plan. So the next step from here is that we want to go ahead and look at our multi-WAN tab. So we can see this setup is, we'll just start from the top. We see all of our external interfaces. Now I will caution you that if you go in and you start playing in this area and set up your monitoring, etc., and you go ahead and change your Comcast or you change your name of this interface, sometimes these settings will revert. So just go ahead and make sure to come back in here and make sure things are looking good. So as we talk about our 4 different modes here that we have, I'll go ahead and just work from the top down from round robin. So as we look at round robin, it should make a pretty good sense what round robin is going to do. Essentially, in this scenario, we might say, obviously from this scenario, we have Comcast, a T1, and a Sprint air card. So traditionally, you probably wouldn't use round robin in this case. Well, let's say you had a couple of Comcast connections. We could definitely leverage round robin so that every other turn or what have you, we're going out one route versus another. And again, we can route or we can weight each connection. So maybe we want to go ahead and have one connection be a heavier weight so that it's not leveraged as much. So as we look at round robin, again here, and I have seen a couple questions come through, and I will address those at the end. When we talk about being able to monitor those links, which is critical for failover and ultimately any other mode that we have, being able to monitor those links is essential. So you can either ping those links or use TCP. Now, I will caution you, one of the first steps that most people do when they go into this area, or they simply do a ping to see if they have external connection, is they want to go ahead and ping 8.8.8.8, which is obviously Google's DNS servers. So I would caution you against this in that sometimes their servers aren't available, or possibly there's some other network issues going on. We certainly wouldn't want to have this in a production environment. What you might actually look at having a connection is simply contact Comcast and say, do you have an IP on the inside of your network that we can go ahead and ping, or maybe on the outside, or what's your recommendation to verify that this link is active? And again, here I wouldn't, this is my demo environment, I wouldn't recommend this in a production environment because these thresholds are quite low. So for here, we're saying we want to ping out every 1 second, and then after 3 failovers, or 3 failures, excuse me, we want to deem this connection as down. Now, most of the time in your environments, I would recommend this because what could happen is that you have false positives, and you definitely wouldn't want essentially link flaps or your branch office VPNs to constantly be choosing. So you might look at, for instance, a 5-second. So we're going to probe every 5 seconds, and ultimately after 3 failures, we're going to see that as a down connection. Same thing for your T1. You can go ahead and configure those. Or you could say, you know what, let's look at having a TCP or a domain name. Again, I will caution you that there are some caveats to this. So you just want to make sure that you come back and monitor those links. And then I will also tell you that you can get those email notifications of your branch office or your links being down or up. So I would recommend that you set those email alerts up so that you're able to monitor and ultimately fine-tune your environment. And then Sprint air cards, maybe you look at pinging something on their end. But again, these are going to be, I believe these are defaulting to 15 seconds, 3 failures, and 3 successes, and we determine that as a downlink at that point. So when we talk about round robin, obviously one of the issues that we're going to run into with round robin is this idea of, maybe Amazon's a bad one, but maybe you're at a shopping, at a website, you have maybe 15 items in your shopping cart, then all of a sudden that website sees us as coming from a completely different IP. Sometimes that can play an effect on, depending on how that website is coded, and ultimately you might lose your entire shopping cart, which if it's on Black Friday, good luck trying to get all those items again. But the point is that we can create what we call sticky connections. So ultimately, we're going to keep this traffic alive for 3 minutes. So if you go to Amazon and put some items in your cart, or another shopping cart, you put some items in your cart, you make a quick phone call to your spouse to see if it's the right to purchase that for Christmas. They say it's okay. You come back within 3 minutes, that shopping cart is going to see that same IP address. When we talk about failback for active connections, we have immediate fallback, so we can stop all those active connections. So again, this is if a multi-WAN failure were to occur. So in this case, we're doing round robin. My Sprint air card, or I apologize, my Comcast link goes down. I'm trying to get those Black Friday deals. It goes ahead and starts going out my Sprint card. Now, maybe Comcast comes back. How's your XTM going to handle that traffic? We have 2 options with that. So we have immediate failback. So we're going to stop all those connections out of that Sprint air card immediately. Or we're going to say, you know what, we're going to allow those connections to keep using that failover device because of the sticky connection, so that the traffic doesn't see that other IP. And then here's where we talk about being able to be notified from send notification email. And I've mentioned this a couple times, but being a former WatchGuard customer, it wasn't always clear. You know, I went through several policies. I wanted to know if people were surfing adult material or if they were trying to do branch office or, proxy workarounds in my environment. And I clicked on send notification email, and I never received those email notifications. I just want to warn you, the sequence of events is going to be that your XTM generates this notification flag, and it sends it to the logging server. And as many of you might have heard, we've just announced Dimension, which is our new logging and visibility tool, which is completely free to existing WatchGuard customers. The other item of note about Dimension is that you don't need to have your firewalls running 11.8. So let's say you're at 11.6 and you want to go ahead and say, you know what, let's have send notifications through email. Let's go ahead and have Dimension configured for those email notifications. Now, Dimension is only available in a VMware environment today. However, we are currently working on getting it for Hyper-V as well. And this will ultimately work with our legacy logging and reporting engine as well. Feel free to reach out to your local SE, your sales engineer, if you need help with setting up these email notifications. Because as we talk about multi-WAN and being notified that your links are down, this is a critical component, being able to be notified via email. So as we look at some of the other options, we have failover. And again, that's going to be pretty simplistic or pretty easy to understand. So in this environment, we are failing over, and we're going to include our interfaces, and we can certainly move those up and down as priority. So in this case, if your Comcast cable modem were to fail over, it might go over your point-to-point, or if you say, you know what, that T1 traffic shouldn't include anything, let's go ahead and exclude that from this model, and then we just have it go directly to our Sprint air card. We're going to go ahead and move that up. Click OK, and again, we can set up the same link monitors for that. And then we look at being able to do immediate or gradual fallback. Now keep in mind, this is grayed out because we're simply saying we're just going to use these several links or these 2 links in failover mode only. So we don't have to worry about sticky connections. When we talk about interface overflow, this is the where we look at being able to maybe hit a threshold and then overflow into a secondary interface. So when we look at, for instance, a Comcast cable modem, and again, this is at any given moment that this traffic is happening. So this isn't saying 10 megs per billing cycle, or this is basically saying 10 megabits per second. So if it hits 10 megabits per second, it's going to go ahead and spill over into our Sprint air card traffic. Now we have the option of kilobits per second, megabits per second, and I would probably, it would be safe to say that we'll see gigabits per second here in the near future as fiber build-outs are rolling out. So when we look at this, we can essentially say, you know what, we might only have 5 megabits per second through Comcast. We go ahead and set up our threshold, and then Sprint might have even smaller threshold. And essentially, once Comcast is filled up and Sprint, if you don't have anyone else, then all that traffic has to wait, essentially. As we look at being able to do a routing table, this is, in my mind, is quite powerful and quite fun as we talk about being able to do creative solutions. So as we look at, again, we simply select which interfaces are part of that routing table. Again, your advanced, you have your sticky connection options back here. And let's go ahead and take a look at how that routing table will look in specific policies. Now, before we mention that, because the virtual interfaces also play a part of being able to do those routing tables, I want to bring your attention to your branch office VPN virtual interfaces. And again, this is new with 11.8 version XDM, and it's freely downloadable. If you have your portal account, log into your portal and download the upgrade to 11.8. And we just had a call today that 11.8.1 is going to be coming out shortly as well. As we look at how this branch office VPN virtual interface is going to look, again, it's not going to be, if you have had any experience with branch office VPNs, it's not going to look that unfamiliar. It's going to look quite familiar to you. Essentially, we're setting up our gateway endpoint. And in this case, we might say, you know what, our local gateway has this IP address. We're going out maybe our Comcast modem. And then, well, in this case, we would want this to be over a Sprint air card. And then we want a dynamic IP address because, as you might recall, the Sprint air card we've configured as DHCP. And then we're going to go ahead and use our user ID at domain, skipping resolving. In a production environment, I would recommend using the resolve option. And then we can build our VPN routes on there just like we would before. I didn't build those for the sake of this. So everything should be pretty familiar to you. However, now what we can do once we've built our virtual interface is go ahead and look at, for instance, a policy and using policy-based routing. So as we look at this, we now have this option to select a method to route outbound traffic. So from here we can say, you know what, let's go ahead and we build, so we can either address traffic obviously through a packet filter or proxy based on our port, or we could say specify a source or destination for this policy. Now when we look at this, now we can say, you know what, let's have all this traffic. So maybe we say traffic from, maybe it's our wireless network that's running on a guest VLAN that we're going to use, and in this case it might be, let's just use my apologies, let's just use a fictitious setup here. Your BYOD traffic might be running on 2.0, and that might be /24. And again, if you're using this, I would encourage you to leverage aliases, because anytime that you need to reference that again, you can simply leverage that alias rather than IP addresses. So in this case, we want to say, let's go ahead and rename this to or guest Wi-Fi. We want to go ahead and specify the source, and we say that they're going to any external, and we want them to go out in a privately or a private connection versus our T1 connection that goes to corporate. So with using this method, we're able to specify that to keep those two lines of traffic completely separate. So as we look at this, we also have the option to configure failover. So again, we could have that traffic spill over to Sprint air card or T1. If it's your guest Wi-Fi, you're probably not going to be that concerned with having failover. Now, I will warn you that this only applies to, as you can see the disclaimer there, only applies to non-IPsec traffic, which means ultimately this is not going to handle your branch office VPN traffic. For instance, if you wanted to deny certain traffic going over your branch office VPN, this is not the way to do this, since it's only applied to non-IPsec traffic. Now in this case, maybe we want corporate traffic to go out at T1. So we're saying any trusted or any optional, depending on your setup. We've labeled it as corporate traffic. We're going to say to any external and be able to go out through your T1 connection. Maybe in your case you don't want any external, but you simply want, maybe you have some resources, your domain shares or your domain controller, and you want to be able to specify that through your your destination field. Now, non-corporate traffic, as we talked about, you're going to be able to specify going out a separate connection. So again, this policy-based routing is going to be perfect for a couple different scenarios. One one, you want to keep guest Wi-Fi traffic completely separate than your corporate traffic. You can do that through policy-based routing. Also, the option to do interface overflow, or maybe you want to, maybe you're a school district and you want your students to show up as a specific connection, and maybe not your corporate connection. So there's any number of possibilities that we have with this. And ultimately, we can say, let's go ahead and fail over to a Sprint air card in those events that one link goes down for that. So I'm going to go ahead. It's 11:36 right now. I wanted to leave some time for questions. I see that we have a number of questions coming in, so we'll address those questions now with that. So some of the questions here that we have coming in: is the firebox with UTM on a Series 5 considered a Layer 7 firewall? So obviously we're covering 2, 3, as well as the in between, and then we're also able to address Layer 7 using that app control features. Again, being able to look at those applications and say, you know what, we want people to get to Facebook, but not Mafia Wars, etc. Would it be possible to get a copy of that presentation? Absolutely. I am recording it, and we will send that out as well. And feel free to let me know if you have any questions. I will put on my email address towards the end there. Well, actually, let's just put that up right now while we go through the rest of these questions. As well as I can send you some advanced documentation if you are interested in learning more about dynamic routing using BGP and OSPF and RIP for those. Okay, so another question, can you confirm that the XTM 330 comes with a Pro upgrade? Yes, that did recently start shipping with a Pro upgrade all the way down to the 2 series. So as long as you purchased that recently, and feel free to reach out to me with your serial number if you're not sure on that, and I can find out for you. Would you have any documentation or references about using VPNs as virtual interfaces? Absolutely. I have some documentation that I can send out to you. Go ahead and send me an email at my email address there listed on this slide, and I'll go ahead, regardless of any documentation that you want, just send me an email requesting that, and I will get that sent over to you. What is the best or recommended method to monitor the interface status on the multi-WAN config page? So again, as we look at that, going back into a network, coming under the multi-WAN, what is the best way to be able to monitor that? Again, that's going to be determined by your environment. For instance, if you have a high-pressure environment, or maybe you're a bank that you maybe can't wait the default of 15 seconds times 3, which would be 45 seconds, to be able to reestablish this branch office VPN over a secondary interface, you might look at decreasing your probe intervals for that. Again, your monitoring status, I wouldn't recommend using Google's DNS servers. This is more of a production or a test environment, excuse me. So in this case, you know, you would contact your ISP, or maybe there's just a hop on the other side of your link to be able to monitor your ISP as well. The one area I will caution you, make sure your ISP IP address that they have given you determines that that is actually a downlink. So what could happen is that you're monitoring Comcast, maybe it's a Comcast IP address, and you're monitoring that. Everything looks good. However, Comcast lost connection to the internet. So in this case, you wouldn't have the ability to, it wouldn't address this as being down. What you can also do is say, you know what, let's do a ping and a TCP, a port 80, or maybe a DNS or domain name for that. And then we want to go ahead and establish that both the ping and TCP must be successful to define the interface as active. So there's a number of options, and again, ultimately this is going to be best determined by the environment that you're trying to configure this in. So as we look at, again, I'll bring up my, let's go ahead and bring up my email address again so you have that to email, and I will go through the rest of these questions. Is my understanding that the default IP for monitoring is the interface's gateway? Again, we talked a little bit about that. By default, when you come in there, go under multi-WAN, go to configuration, and I apologize if I don't completely understand what you're asking. But if I go under, for instance, I added a T1, I go ping, so here is the option for being able to monitor that. Now, if none of these options are available, it's going to go ahead and look at that link connection on that interface. So again, maybe it's plugged into, or someone rips out the cord of the interface, then it's going to see this as being a down connection. The only caveat to not configuring these is that if we're just relying on, for instance, an active link on that interface, there could be a routing issue or other issues that ultimately aren't going to be detected unless we leverage either one, two, or both of those options. Is there a setup document for installing a dimension on a VM with VMware? Absolutely, and that's part of the Tech Tips and Tricks seminar series. Maybe we'll bring that option down the road, maybe next month. But this is simply an OVA file that you can download from your portal account and simply deploy that out through your VMware infrastructure. And really, as we saw, with the legacy reporting, we saw that it took the configuration about 2 hours on a Windows interface, so you had to dedicate a Microsoft Windows license for that. Now, we've actually timed it and had competitions. We've had that as low as 5 minutes to be able to log and have visibility into those log files using Dimension. And again, for those of you that maybe came later or didn't catch it, Dimension is completely free from WatchGuard. You do have to have WatchGuard XDM to leverage Dimension. You do not have to have 11.8 to point to Dimension. It works with our legacy products as well. So again, email me on that setup documentation and we'll get you the help for that. So next question. So once we have the additional WAN interfaces configured, we must go into each and every policy to configure the failover. Excellent question, and I apologize about not making that clearer. So when we look at going into network, in this particular case, we're only concerned with failover. So we're going to switch this into failover mode. We're going to specify what options are available as a failover. So we might just look at a Comcast failing over to a Sprint air card. Click OK. We set up our link monitors. Click OK. Now, we do not have to go in and to each policy to specify the policy-based routing. Those are two separate entities. So if I look at, for instance, my ping traffic, and again, I will caution you that I would not recommend having a ping policy allowing any to any in case someone says, well, you're not displaying your best security practices. This is simply for a demo environment. So as we look at this, maybe this ping policy, even though we don't have this use policy-based routing, this traffic is going to go out my Comcast link initially, and if that goes down, it's going to fail over to my Sprint air card. So you don't need to revisit every policy on that. I think the front panel shows link status, and that is correct. As we look at the WatchGuard System Manager, and I believe he's talking about the front panel as well, I believe that's an option. I can't guarantee that that's completely accurate, but we can definitely see that through WatchGuard System Manager and be able to leverage. Let me just show you real quick. So as we bring up a WatchGuard System Manager, I do realize that we've hit our limit of 11:45. let me just bring this up real quick and show you while I bring up some other questions. Is it possible to have a backup branch office VPN that will auto failover as well? And the answer to that question is yes. You can have a branch office branch office VPN that will be auto failover. So again, if you look at some of those tips and tricks that I've showed you as a resource, you'll be able to see that some of those options on there. So here we see the interface, and we see the link status, and you would actually see failed if that link were down through WatchGuard System Manager. You can also see your branch office VPN tunnels. So again, here's my virtual interface, and here's my legacy or your non-virtual interface branch office VPN. And Bruce, if you have more questions on how to set that up, for the sake of time, feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, and I will for sure get you the answers you need. So with that, I wanted to wrap it up. I know your time is valuable, and I appreciate your attention. I appreciate you wanting to learn more about our products. Feel free, if you have any questions at all, and I'll bring that back up here for you. Feel free to reach out to me, send me an email, and we'll definitely get you the documentation that you need in terms of doing more advanced features, configuring those advanced features for your firewalls. So again, I want to thank you for your time. Hope you have a great weekend and a great